Hello and welcome to another episode of the Doctoral Dialogues. This episode is going to be very special because we are going to ask our guest about a 5-point formula for a successful startup. Our guest today is Sivam Pillai. He did his Ph.D. from National University of Singapore, his master's from UK. He has seen the world and now he is building his own company. His company Zolnoi is a startup which helps medium and large scale industries in energy and production efficiency. Sivam is going to share his journey, his experiences, and he is going to talk about the challenges that are faced while building your own startup. So stay tuned till the end and enjoy. Hi Sivam,
Hi, Ankush. Thank you so much for having me here.
thanks for joining us.
And also thanks for doing whatever you're doing. It's very inspiring.
Thank you so much. The purpose and aim of this podcast is to talk to different people who are working in different areas, who have seen the world, who have studied or worked in different parts of the world, and bring our audience their stories, their experiences, and so on. So let me start with a very specific question. Take your liberty to answer it. So, is there a 5-point formula, like a thumb rule, for a successful startup? Is there a formula for a successful startup?
See, I think good question. I think we should ask the startup greats of because then I would also want to pick that up from them. But I don't personally believe that there is a formula for a successful startup. I think there is always the grind, there is always the passion, which is important, and then there is always understanding your market and the people and the problem, right? So I put them all in the understanding phase. So as long as you do the basics right, the most obvious things are usually the answer. One should be able to build a successful startup. And at least from my founder community, I know that most of us don't really think too much about the success of the startup as much as solving the problem, right? That's what we are here for. We know we have a passion towards a certain problem, and we just want to solve it, no matter what it takes, right? And that is pretty much what drives us on a day-to-day basis, and we are here to do that. Eventually, the market and the people and sometimes the money decides whether you're successful or not. But yeah, I think as long as we solve the problem, we are happy with that. I don't know if I answered your question, but yeah, that's
Yeah, you mentioned a few things. You definitely
yeah.
answered the question, but I would like to talk more about it. One thing that was evident from your answer was the problem statement. So could you elaborate this point? I mean, ultimately, as I understand, any business is trying to solve some problem. Um Rather, engineering is all about problem solving. But could you tell us more about the difference between engineering and entrepreneurship? Both are problem solving, but what is so peculiar about entrepreneurship?
Right. No, I think very pertinent question, and let me answer firstly by talking about what not to do, which I have been doing as well in the past. A lot of us as engineers, so in fact, my PhD guide would often call this as you're prisoner of your own skills, right, or own capability. So often what happens is you have the solution first. So you, for example, in my case, I did my PhD in AI. So in a way, I had the solution first, and that's not the best approach to solving a problem. The focus should be primarily on solving, finding out what the problem is, and then get the right solution in place. So that is very important, that you do not fit your solution to a problem, but if I find a problem first and then find the right solution for it. In terms of the startup world, I think there is more to it. I mean, if there is anything more to it, it's mainly how do you build a solution that the market needs and it can adopt as well. I think over this conversation, I think I'll unpack this more. But one of the challenges we often face is some of the solutions, while it is good, it may not be feasible from a commercial angle. As engineers, often what happens is we are more driven by the technology. we go for the most fanciest of technologies where needed, where it may not be needed. Uh, you might have heard of this thing called Occam's razor. So usually look for the simplest solution to a problem, right? But often people end up, because we know so much, right? You often you have built some most bleeding edge technology in your academics. So if you decide to know, let me implement this, but the industry is 10, 20 years behind, that will be a very big jump for the industry to take. So you need to understand where they are, and then try to gradually build them up to the latest technology. I think that is, at least personally, that's what I think is where often we as engineers may not be looking at the problem in that filter with that frame of reference. And as long as you're able to do that, I think that is where a startup becomes successful. Because only technical success wouldn't make you successful. You need to be commercially viable and successful.
While doing my PhD, I observed this. One of the objectives in a PhD is always some socio-economic impact of your research. But my observation is it hardly takes that form of a commercial product or a service, which actually solves a real-time problem in an industry. Tell us more about what problem you are trying to solve, and then try to elaborate on this point more.
Sure. And maybe what I'll do is I'll try to give a bit of the background of the company as well, what we're trying to do, and then elaborate more on the problem as I speak.
Right.
So Zolnoi as a company, we are focused on solving the energy efficiency and the production efficiency problem for mid to large scale manufacturers. Uh, so what is happening? Why did we even think of this? So we went into the market. See, definitely there was some uh, context of why I chose manufacturing, because that's what I did in my PhD, which I think we will talk a bit later on. So the at least the problem area for me was defined when I decided to go to build my own company. I knew that I wanted to do something in the manufacturing space. So I started talking to a lot of these manufacturing companies. Thankfully, through my network of friends and family, I was able to get in touch with a lot of people. What the most So what we understood were, I think, a couple of things. So one is, in today's world, if you look at the last 3 to 5 years, there's been an energy spike. So what we mean by that is, with the wars and everything happening, the energy cost actually has risen quite sharply in the last few years. So energy is starting to becoming top of mind challenge for a lot of industries. Then on the other hand, there is this whole carbon emission challenge as well, where, for example, continents like Europe, they are planning to launch policies like CBAM. You can read a bit more about it, but this is, simply put, it is about a tax, or if you're doing more, putting more carbon on the earth, right? So if you have more carbon emission, there'll be separate tax for you when they import product from you. So a lot of manufacturers based in the Asian region, China, India, other places, so they need to be more careful now and become more sustainable if they want to be still competitive and be able to sell in markets like Europe and the US, which are the best markets to sell in anyway. So these are some of the things that are motivating people to think energy, think efficiency in general. 10 years back, people were focused on just on making sure they're maximizing their production from their factory. But now throughput is definitely important. Yield is definitely important. How much you're making with your factory is important. But energy and how sustainably you do it is also becoming critical. So this is at least what we understood from talking to a number of people. But then it seems like an obvious problem. So then there should be an obvious solution as well. But why isn't it there, or why how have people not adopted it? So that's the next question we had. When we went further down to understand, okay, to do this, what data do you have? We realized that firstly, this problem is more complex to solve than, for example, if we are looking at a commercial building, right? Let's say take a mall, for example. The pattern of usage is very standard. The main culprit is the occupancy. As long as and the main energy consumer is your cooling. So cooling is your main energy consumer. The reason for that is the occupancy. So if you optimize your cooling to the occupancy of the building, you pretty much solve the energy efficiency problem. Of course, there is more one can innovate there as well, but the problem is not as complicated. But in a manufacturing segment, we are looking at data from a number of different points. So your production pattern, so that will impact your energy use. Your maintenance activities, that will impact your energy use. Your material, the overall supply chain in general. So all these different states will impact how you're performing, how you're producing, how you're using the energy. So we call it the data silo. So you have a bunch of data, often, not always, but even if you have this data, these are in different silos. So to be able to take a decision on optimizing by looking at all these data is not obvious. It's not simple, right? So that is one of our first understanding of why this problem is difficult to solve. And the second challenge is also on the overall broader digitalization and the adoption. So industry as it is went through a number of revolution. People in this area would often talk about industry 4.0. So just to for those who do not know this, so industry revolution happened in four stages. Now we are going into the fifth one. The first one is where steam-based engines came into place. Second is when electrical systems came into place, and third is automation. A lot of automation came in. Fourth is the current one where we are talking about data, digital information being used to optimize and improve your overall performance. So that's where we are. But this was coined, I think, in 2010-11. So it's been good 10-15 years now. But still, if you see the adoption of digitalization in general, when I say digitalization, I'm simply talking about being able to collect data from all your processes, right? So that is very low, lagging behind, and for the reason that I just now shared. Data is like widely dispersed.
There have been many processes and systems in place.
Yeah.
Like I know from instrumentation, there are systems like Historian, there are PLCs, there are DCSs, and so on, smart sensors, SCADA, and so on. So I guess these systems individually have been there. Data collection, historic data analysis, trend analysis, and so on and so forth. So does that help?
In fact, that is exactly what I'm also trying to say, where the data that's available, there are two gaps there. Number one, how long do you store this data? So often, if you take a PLC, typically they have a 30-day storage. After that, the data just, it's a first in, first out kind of a setup. So it just starts to get erased. Nobody is pulling that data into a common system. I mean, when I say nobody, obviously I'm saying most of them are not pulling that data into a common system. And then when you take a DCS as well, so we call this islands of automation. So what's happening is a lot of islands, for example, a certain area in a shop floor, they are all connected with a single DCS system. So for example, if I take an example, the industry that we work with, so pipe manufacturing is a very common industry that we work with. So mixing is a section. So they have a very good solid SCADA system, which collects all the process data of the mixing. Then you go to extrusion. Extrusion also has some level of data. Let's say energy is being monitored for all your extrusion machines. But is there any interlink between these two? Many cases, no. So I know how my extruder is operating. So my extruder operator can take some actions based on data. Mixer operators can take some action based on that data. But can I marry these two data? Often the answer is no. As in, it's not there yet. Or it's very limited in such integration. And that is where so this silos of data is becoming a challenge, and that's what we're trying to like. One of the reasons why we are here is to bring that data in a common platform, and then the layer of AI and analytics. So that's where the next step comes in. So okay, once you have the database, now what do you do with that? And that is where the whole power of AI, power of analytics comes into play, to be able to make predictions, to be able to detect patterns, to be able to understand correlations of different parameters. And then in the end, in our case, what we hence do is give them real-time alerts to take necessary actions. So this could be as simple as your machine is idling for the last 30 minutes where it has wasted X units of energy. So either turn it off or start production on that machine. Right? So these are the kind of, this is a very simple one I'm sharing here, but these are the kind of insights we are able to deliver, which in many cases saves a lot of energy.
Right. I mean, don't get me wrong, but this all seems very abstract. So how should a person who is just starting, approach this problem statement? Because what I mean to ask is, do you always have to have Ph.D. or experience in the field to start? Let me give you an example. For example, nowadays we have so many 10-minute delivery apps or services available. So this is an example that our audience can easily connect to. So what I'm trying to ask here is, someone has to visualize this, right? Someone has to visualize that this problem exists. This problem is feasible, it is solvable. So this has to be visualized by someone, right? To try and attempt to solve this problem. So what do you say about this? How should someone approach to the problem statement?
Right. I mean, talk to people, right? I think the simple answer is you need to talk. You need to be in the market, be in the industry. And also don't shy away from the fact that often your theories or hypothesis may go wrong, because you may assume that this is a problem in the industry. So then what do you do? I mean, so because we are PhDs, right? So the standard process of research. So that is what you would probably try to do. Build a hypothesis, test if that hypothesis is correct. If not, go back, right? Go back to the drawing room. Pretty much that's what one has to do. So there is, in the entrepreneur world, there is this thing called mom test. I'm not sure if you've heard of this, but it's a very common way of testing the market. So I also don't know the details right now, but in simple terms, we are talking about asking the most fundamental questions to understand what is the problem that the end user is facing. And you need to do this not with 5, 10 people. I'm talking about 100, 500 people, right? So that is the kind of number. That is when the data becomes more statistically reasonable, right? So and then you'll be saying, okay, I've spoken with, for example, in my journey, when I did this, so like any engineer or a problem solver, I said, industry mein this is the problem, I'm going to solve it. But my investors, I'm very thankful to them, and people that I spoke with, my mentors, they said, calm down. First, find out if the problem really exists, right? You can't just assume this is the problem. So what did I do? Then I just went into my LinkedIn, went to people I know. I just asked them, give me 30 minutes of your time, right? And often I would take more than that. But I mean, most people are kind. I mean, the world is a beautiful place in the way I see it. So most people are kind. People want you to do something. They're supportive quite often. So I went to talk to a number of people either through video calls. So I started during COVID times. So traveling was not that easy. But yeah, so I would do a lot of video calls. So we would try to really understand the problem. So that's, I think it goes back to the first point that I mentioned earlier as well. Yes, when you're coming out of the academics, the chances are you might not necessarily know where the problem is or what the problem is. So just talk to a number of these people, make a nice questionnaire, and also be respectful of the time that they're giving you. So make use of that time and like narrow down. By talking to 100, 500 people, you would definitely be able to say, okay, there are 10 problems in this industry. Of these 10, I can solve 5 of these. In the 5, these 3 are the most important problems, both for them and from how I can solve it. So this is how you narrow it down. And then this 3, again, it is very difficult to go within like a day 1 or a day 50 to tell ki yahi problem hai, this is what I want to solve, because that is where then you start building your product. So whoever you spoke with, so I'm just continuing on that process. So now I've spoken with them, I've done my research, I now know what I need to build roughly. So now I come back, I build some MVPs, right? So don't build the product. So this is again a very important mantra that we are always told: don't build the product on day 1, right? So what you're going to do, so for example, if you're building a data dashboard, like I'm roughly what I'm doing, instead of building a dashboard, all I'm going to do is create an Excel, as simple as that. Forget about building data dashboard, forget about all the analytics, create an Excel, create some visualizations, take it back to them. Okay, is this data what you want to see, right? And you can always create some dummy data if you want. So and then again go back to them. Some of them will say, "Nee, this is not what I want to see." They will give you more feedback, and this is where you have pretty much narrowed down. Okay, this is the problem, and this is the solution they're looking for. So this journey could take, I mean, depending on the industry and sector, 1 month to 3 months, sometimes longer. But this is the process you have to go through, and then you refine your solution after that.
So what you're trying to say is problem is never a static statement. You have to make changes to it, you have to adapt.
Yeah.
And probably change the problem statement itself based on the feedback, right?
Correct.
So, as an engineer, this is interesting. As an engineer, I've always focused on refining the solution rather than refining the problem statement. That's an interesting take, and a very stark difference that I understand now between engineering and entrepreneurship. That you have to refine your problem statement, not just the solution.
Sorry, just to clarify that. So one of the aspects is also this assumption that I know the problem. I think you have to come out of that, right? Because there are so many big people, so many people who have been working in the industry. So the point you asked me earlier, okay, if I'm coming afresh, like how do I like really get this, right? So that is where you're talking to these people who've got tens of years of 20 plus years of experience. So whatever you read in the papers and books and articles, whatever, that may tell a story, but when you hear from the real world, when the people that they have worked on, you will understand that broadly, yes, that is a problem, but there is something interesting inside, which is what needs to be solved. So again, if I take my example, the factory would always just say, okay, हमें तो हमारा production बढ़ाना, we want to increase the production capacity, we want to, in the end, it's all money, right? So all they're saying is we want to increase the profit of our factory, of a plant. So that's all they're thinking. So but that can't be just I mean, that is the problem, but that can't be solved, right? You can't just say, okay, I'll increase the profit of the company. So what do I have to do to increase that profit? So ye jo part hota hai, this is the part that the people in the industry would be able to tell you better.
Right. I talked to Atul in our previous episode. So
Yeah.
he kind of mentioned the same thing. He gave an example that, let's say, he asked me about a scenario where a mom is with her son. The son wants something to eat. He wants a pizza. Now the mom has to decide whether to give him a pizza or not. So basically what he said was, which kind of resonates with what you're trying to say, that he asked a very fundamental question. Will the mom give her son the pizza? So I said maybe not because of health concerns. So what he said was that if you think very basically, the son might not even need pizza.
Yeah.
He might just be hungry, right? So the mother has to decide what to feed him, what to give him. So he mentioned about these first principle thinking. So do you agree with this? Do you think that first principles thinking is a correct approach to look at things, look at problem statements?
Problems in life in general has to be looked at from first principles is my opinion as well. So I totally agree with what Atul probably shared last time with you. Atul is a good friend as well. So yeah, so pretty much because often we as engineers, right? I mean, that is why I have a very good co-founder with me. So who doesn't necessarily think from an engineering perspective, who is able to think from a more business, sales, and customer perspective, and that's very important because otherwise, with PhDs, like I said right in the beginning, prisoners of our own skills. So we end up making a problem too complex.
Correct. Yep. So that brings me to the second important point of the 4-point formula that we are trying to discuss. We discussed the first part, which is the problem statement in detail. I guess the second point is the teams, the co-founders, the developers, the people that you work with. It's never a one man's job, if I understand it correctly. What do you say about this?
I mean, to simply answer, yes, it's definitely never a one-man solution, one-man play. In some startups, maybe it is possible, but yeah, generally speaking, you have to have the right kind of people, right kind of mix of talent. So I can tell a bit of like the journey again to help unpack this. So I was a part of Entrepreneur First, so they build cohorts of people. So they specifically call themselves talent investors. They don't call themselves startup investors. And the reason for that is when you join this program, you don't join as a startup. You join as an individual. And then the goal of this whole first 3 months of this program is to find the right partner to work with. So finding the problem is important, but as much important is finding the person whom you're going to work with, right? So as a co-founder, you're going to be spending, I mean, assuming you're going to go on this for a long run, you're going to be spending a significant amount of your life and time with this person.
It's like second marriage.
Yeah. Exactly. Another Bharat matrimony in the end, the whole talent investor in a company. But the whole point is you're trying to find the right person to work with, and one of the most important aspects we at least were told to look at was a complementarity in the skills, right? So two techies with exactly the same skill, it's a good combo, but sometimes what you end up doing is what we just now discussed: build a very fancy solution no one wants. And with the purely business minded founders, you would have like 100 customers waiting for you, but you won't have a solution. Combining these two skills are very important. So understand business customers plus the right technical capability. So that is fundamental. So the co-founders have to be very good, and then you should be aligned in your thinking. So and then when it comes to the team, a very old Elon Musk quote comes to mind, but that always has driven me throughout my career. So when you're working with a team, it's like photons or electrons in a circuit, right? They all have to be aligned. They're all going in different direction. Your circuit will never complete. So that is very important, that your team has to be aligned. The vision, the goal should be fully aligned. Then skills can be learned. So when I'm also hiring a team, of course I'm looking for certain, let's say, development skills, programming skills. All of that is important. There is some baseline that one has to meet. But the most important is are they aligned to the vision that you're building? Because they could be building their own something. They are deciding to build your vision. I can share more, but when I work with my team, I very hardly tell them what to do. I give them a broad direction, but they do it themselves. What I do tell them is what is the problem we're solving, and what is the customer expecting. That is the most important part of a discussion. So yeah, I think as long as your team is fully aligned in a goal, I think rest forms nicely.
Maybe that's the third point. The vision, which is something different than the problem statement itself, but it is very important because the companies those are successful, they are often identified by their vision, not just the problem statement that they are trying to solve. For example, the example of Apple comes to mind. You have talked about Elon Musk, so he's known for his vision, obviously.
Yeah.
So tell us more about this vision. Tell us, what is it that binds a team of different personalities, different people together?
I think maybe I would tweak it a little bit more. Like I think I touched on this: vision plus passion. Probably both comes together in some ways. But yeah, I think you have to definitely have a broader vision of why you're here, right? What is it that drives you? So pretty much it is a fact. I mean, everybody knows that startup takes a lot of you, right? So it consumes a lot of your time, your energy, you're sacrificing a number of other things to be able to spend your time here. So if you do not have a vision and to aid that with a passion to do it, I think you might build something, but not in a scalable, in a large possible potential way, right? Vision, if I unpack it, but also how people make it over complex as well. I mean, it doesn't have to be a very nicely worded statement. That is not necessarily the vision. So what is it that you're going to do that is going to make an impact in the society and in the industry probably that you're working with for a very long time, right? So you're not talking about a couple of years. You're not talking about even a decade. So one is thinking of how I transform this industry in a permanent basis, which would live for probably several decades or even centuries, right? So that is what you're thinking. And once you have that thought in your mind, okay, I want to see. So for again, if I take my personal example, I've seen manufacturing, and I'm not happy with it. I want to see it very differently. And another thing I always so both Varun and me, my co-founder Varun, so both of us were very personally interested in the fact about sustainability, right? So sustainable growth of our world in general, right? So that is something we were very passionate about. So we always felt that climate crisis or all of these are not distant future; they are real. They are happening today. and what is it and how can we contribute in a sector that is very less known to do much of those initiatives, but the worst culprit also. And yeah, that's where we took it, and we decided to build this team. So tomorrow, what may happen also for a startup is, okay, I'm building this AI based product today. I may change my product, right? That is what happens eventually. The journey. So I learn something. I say, okay, इससे भी ये better है, but the broader
Right.
vision would still remain aligned. So that is the importance of having that vision in place, so that you're always consistently in a direction that you are going forward.
And that direction could very well simply be like being the best in your field or earning a lot of money, right?
Yeah.
As simple as that. Maybe being the best service provider, maybe being the best product in the market, so that everyone looks up to it and then realigns their own passions to that vision.
uh, don't worry too much about how your startup gets positioned compared to others, right? So this whole point of being best, the only risk in that is you're just comparing yourself to the competitors. Of course, if you solve the problem, you will become the best, right? So you focus on that. Yeah.
So when we started this discussion, we didn't agree that the formula, 5-point formula exists. But this conversation is taking it to us to different places, and I guess the fourth point that comes out of this is the funding, because we can talk about the vision, we can talk about the passions being realigned, but at the end of the day, all is being done for money. We can talk about all of these things, but funding is very real, right? I've seen this from PhD's perspective. Getting funding is never easy, but it is very important for a startup, because as I understand, startup is a commercial entity. You have to give salaries to people working for you. You have to get technology. You have to get an office and so on. So you have to spend on many things, right? So tell us, how important is this, and what are the challenges that you face in this particular point, getting funding?
Yeah, yeah. No, absolutely. In the end, you have to make something, otherwise you'll be driven out of your house. But at the same time, you have to make sure you build a team, right? So that also needs that funding. One has to ensure that your team is working at the best of their capabilities, and to do that, money is always a incentive. And you need to be also, so the challenge often startups like us in a very early stage phase, we are a very early stage startup still, is that the best of talents are always taken by Googles and Amazons and the big players of today in India, even players like PhonePe, right? So these players are able to pay significantly well for top talent. Uh, so it is always a challenge for us. So how do you still attract the top talent to work with you? Because without that, you're not able to eventually build the right product. So for funding, as best as you can get, helps you at least fairly be competitive in the market to attract the right talent. Because then once you have that minimum baseline of uh, and I'm not just talking about salaries, it's all the cost that comes with having a entity, like you rightly said. It could be the tax compliances, it could be the cloud service requirements, and other third party vendors. So all of these will come into play. There's a lot of cost involved. And as long as you can meet the baseline, then when people are coming with you, they are probably coming for the vision. So yeah, so baseline means money is needed. Now, to tell you how challenging or easy it is, I would say it depends, honestly speaking, and it also depends on a number of things like the market in general. So because a lot of us in our usual lives, so we look at market for different reasons. कि कौन से इसमें share में डालना है पैसे. So those are the things we're looking for, just for our own incomes. But the market play has a direct impact on how many investors are there available now. If the market is, for example, performing poorly, the number of investors will be less. So the supply is less, which means that it's going to be more challenging to get the money out. But on the other hand, if the market is doing excellently well, there's too much money.
And how's the scenario now?
People call it the VC winter still. It's slightly starting to ease up, but 2021 was the best year. I was just starting up. If I was 1 year older when in 2021, I think it was a brilliant year. Pretty much, you just say I have a startup, people will pay giving you the money. So it was a brilliant year for investments. The main reason for that was during COVID, a lot of investment didn't happen. So a lot of money got stuck with the investors, and they can't keep the money, right? They have to put it somewhere. And so they were like rushing to put it anywhere as long as there is a avenue to do that. So 2021 was a brilliant year. 22 later half of 22 until end of 2023 was a very bad year because nobody was getting the money out because of all the market prices, all the geopolitical events that were happening, and general slowdown across the world. Right. So people were literally not parting away the money they had. Particularly larger companies had more challenge during that time because at least early stage companies are looking for smaller investments. Larger companies are looking for much bigger investments. So they were pretty much completely stopped. Early stage companies were getting the money provided you have more proven market. So basically the risk appetite of the investor, right? It goes down when the market is low. That is the story generally fundraising wise. But luckily for me, a thing that helps is Ph.D. So definitely in this place because you have something to show, right? So yes, I am a Ph.D. So I have published papers. So I know what I'm doing, right? So that is important. So that does help in attracting some investors. So especially deep tech investors. So my university in Singapore, so they were also very entrepreneurship friendly. So they wanted to get into the whole entrepreneurial journey during that time. So they were also quite supportive in connecting us to the right people. But post that, institutions like Entrepreneur First that I mentioned, so they will put that initial seed, not even seed, pre-seed money. So as long as you get into that, then it's in your capability to then build on further. So to summarize my answer, I do not personally believe fundraising is the most challenging activity. At least it is one of the challenging activity for sure. But if you have the right product, right team, and the right customers and market, I think you're set. You should be able to get the investment.
So does this help having different people tackling different problems in a startup? We have talked about this earlier about teams and people in a startup, but a role of a CEO is different, a role of a CTO is different, there is someone to look at finances and so on. So does this help tackling different challenges?
No, absolutely. I agree. In fact, a very interesting story. So when I started up the company, I was the sole founder. So I used to look after everything, right from talking to customers, to building the product, to talking to investors, to giving update to my past investors. Talking to mentors, listening to them. And the admin part. In India, there is a still challenge. I mean, with all things that's happening, still there is more administrative work one has to do. So all of this was taken by me, and I was at one point like, "Nay, this is not feasible." And what will also happen is there'll be always this sinusoidal approach of things. So I'll be peaking on product development. When I do that, my investor discussion drops down. So then I have to build that back again. So this was happening when I was solo. So I totally realized that this is not going to work. So I definitely need to find somebody to work with. So I found Varun. He's a brilliant guy with a lot of experience. So then once he came with me, so we were able to share the responsibilities. And also, like, two minds thinking on this topic means you're like having a lot of brainstorming discussions. You're countering each other. You're being the devil's advocate sometimes, thinking of the worst possible outcomes. So all of these helps to be able to like really fine tune the pitch that you have to the market, as in to the customer and to the investor. And very interesting point here as well. I mean, when I started the journey, I prepared one slide deck which should work both for customers and the investor. But during the journey, I realized no, you can't. So your company is the product for the investor, right? But for your customer, your product is the product. So it's very subtle, but there are difference in how you pitch to the two people. So that is something I learned as well, and it's important.
So just a tangent, question here. We'll talk about it more in the second part, but because you mentioned of presentations and pitches and so on. Does introduction of AI, LLMs in particular, like ChatGPT and so on, does it help you in all of this in your daily work?
Definitely. I mean, we are in that era of AI, right? Where ChatGPTs are taking over everything. Absolutely. I mean, I feel it is helpful, but it's almost like we say, no, there is a saying I can't remember, but the whichever the tools that is there, you have to be a very good tool man to use the tool, right? As long as you know what to expect from the AI tool, then absolutely it's useful. So ChatGPT, I use it a lot. Sometimes also just as a buddy. For example, if I'm going to pitch to a customer, if I know the typical characteristics of them, I'll just play it out. I'll say, I'm going to talk to this customer. What should I say? So I'm pretty much sure that most of it is going to be typical template content, but I might pick up one or two things and then I refine it myself. Coding is another space where I do use some of these tools. Cloud AI is very good on that. So the code quality is very good. So if I want to build a concept or a simple function to do a certain thing, obviously the core AI itself is built by us on our own. That's our proprietary aspect. But anything in terms of, let's say, the dashboard, how to show a certain screen, an element of that, a widget in that. So I can just ask the AI to help me like put a layout or a structure to the code. So that is quite useful.
Designing has become very easy. For example, I'm not a designer myself, but I have to do it for my YouTube channel, the logo design and so on and so forth. It has become very easy using these tools because of AI. And your product is primarily AI, so we'll talk about it more in the second.
If I can touch on the part
half.
of where we are planning to use this LLMs as well in our own product. A lot of our outcomes, like I said before, is data, insights, recommendations, analytics, all of that. So we already have a prototype in place, POC, where based on our data, we are using our LLMs to summarize this information, right? So it's very easy for the end users because the operators that we work with, they're not particularly highly skilled from a technology point of AI and those space, right? So to interpret the data is not as obvious for them as it is for some of us. Using LLMs, we are simplifying that further, where our recommendations that come to the platform are not just simple text, but these are LLM generated text, and it tries to help them understand, okay, things like by just looking at the data over a period of time, that your energy spiked every day in the evening between 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. So we would be launching this somewhere in, I think, March. But we've got the POC in place. Yeah, that's how we're using it in our product.
The final point that I want to discuss in this episode is about infrastructure. Infrastructure is one of the key points that help in building a successful startup. And I want you to talk about this more from this perspective, that anyone who wants to get into building their own company or a startup, the support structure is available. You mentioned about your university helping you, the incubation centers that are there, the talent investment that you talked about. All of this is available at initial stages to help a startup become successful. So
absolutely. No, I mean, there are again two parts to this answer, if I'm being absolutely honest. So like I said, we are a AI software company. So the infrastructure we need is a good computer. That's pretty much it, right? As long as we have that, we are able to build a lot of things on our own. But I know a number of, like, because I was a part of a cohort where there were multiple startups who started their journey. Particularly if you are in the more hard technology sectors like biotech, for example. So there you need lab access. So without a lab access, what would you do, right? So you can't create your own lab, which will probably cost you crores. So you need to get the support of the industry and the people. So that is definitely there for those sectors. So coming firstly to my sector, the pure software sector, which is also where there's way too many software startups, because it's very easy to build, if you ask me. And the good part is the industry is very supportive. A lot of people do not understand this until they come inside the industry. They think if they're going to compete you, why would they support you? But that's generally not how the industry generally works, because everybody learns from each other. So that's how I've seen the industry. So things like AWS, Google, for example, AWS has its own predictive technology, predictive AI for manufacturing. So they do compete with us in some spaces, to be honest. But at the same time, we get like startup credits from AWS to run our cloud services. So Google's and Microsoft's, pretty much every big company gives you a lot of credits. Uh, very thankful to every single big company which has given us these credits, because in the starting, because you have a very small fund. If pre-seed is a small amount usually, so you want to optimize on where you put that money. So thankfully, even services like MongoDB, where probably you'll be storing your databases, so all of them give you credits. Most of the credits would comfortably last you for a good 1 year, probably more sometimes. Even right now, we are in the GitHub startup program. So we have a commercial, the more advanced GitHub that we use, but it's mostly free of cost for us, right? So that will last us 1 year. So these are kind of tools you should definitely make use of. As long as you have a decent product, you would get that. Of course, there is some benefit for them as well, right? Because if you're going to host your services on AWS for a long time, you're going to put a lot of money on their platform. So that is, of course, how they are thinking from a business point of view. But at least for the starting phase of your journey, this is going to help you a lot. Now coming to the non-software side, the hard technologies, it could be even the embedded systems and IoT. If you're innovating on that, you need support. But I strongly believe that the ecosystem is there today. Probably 10 years back, it might have been more challenging. But today, many institutions understand the value what a startup brings in terms of actual realizable product of commercial value. So I know a friend of mine who built basically a product that can, I'm not good in biotech, but a product that could help detect the COVID-like virus strains, right? So they were working on that, and they got support from a major pharma company. They got support from a couple of hospitals for nothing. They didn't have any product. They didn't have any personal contacts or anything, but they were willing to support them. So speak to the right people. Usually the top management is better. So speak to them, and they're always ready to support you. The whole ecosystem, the startup revolution that's happened in the last 5 to 10 years, the ecosystem understands how a startup gets built. So they're willing to support you. And another good thing about Bangalore is, so slightly going beyond the infrastructure, but you also need users. Bangalore is pretty good in that, I personally feel, where any product you take to the market, you will get 1,000 customers to be your guinea pigs per se, but at least be your trial users, right? So people are very open to try new things.
So, and I always say this, that there is an app for everything in Bangalore.
True. If I see something new, okay, chalo try karte hain. Let's see what. Yeah.
So towards the end of our discussion, I again want to ask you a very specific question about what your advice would be for a to-be entrepreneur. A person wants to start his own company, his own startup. What your advice would be? And also tell us from this perspective that what are the perks of doing all this?
Okay. I mean, I still do not consider myself experienced enough to give that level of advice.
Right, but you can talk from the perspective of what motivated you, right?
Yeah. I mean, like you rightly said, I mean, that's what we mostly covered in the first half of this conversation. But to put it simply, the whole point on the like, why are you here, right? What do you want? And yeah, I think that's a very interesting point. I've seen people who just want the tag of a co-founder or startup founder. Then that is not the right motivation. It's like even in PhD, right? A lot of people sometimes would just get into there because they want a doctorate in front of their name. Because these days, the worst part is if you go to LinkedIn, right? There are advertisements that say, get a doctor in front of your name, take our course, right? So I don't think that should be why you should be doing those courses. And the same applies for startup as well. So not because it's one of the more glamorous position that you build a company. It's okay to be one of your desires. No, nothing wrong in that, but that cannot be the primary reason why you're here. But other than that, if you have a problem that you're passionate to solve, there should be an itch. We call it actually the itch, right? So, yaar, ye kyun ho raha hai? Like, why is this still there, right? As long as you have that itch, then you should be building a company, definitely.
So if you're facing a problem,
not necessarily facing or even seeing, right? You're saying ki, "Arey, this could be done better. Why are they doing like this?" The most common for us would be the way government offices work, right? Often we're like, "Arey, why are they doing this?" So these are the things. That is why a lot of documentation they got digitalized, right? It seemed like a very traditional way of.
I mean, we often hear this that don't generalize things, but I guess in this case it perfectly works. For example, if you're seeing something, you're facing something, then there may be thousands of people who might be facing the same problem.
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, a different way of positioning that is, I also feel sometimes that everybody should be a startup founder. Everybody should build something, right? It could be a small thing, right? You don't necessarily have to again have a very flashy, fancy product.
Okay, now talk about the perks of doing all this.
Perks, yeah, it's hard to say, but one perk that which people think is the case, I want to like be very clear on that, which is khud ka malik, right? That is a very popular thing, at least in India, I've heard of. I don't think that is true.
Is it?
Because you're still answerable to your investors, you're still answerable to your co-founder, you're still answerable to your customers, of course. And the moment you're deviating and doing something random, they are going to come and question you. So in that sense, you're always answerable to somebody. But having said that, you do get some level of independence, right? You can experiment a little bit more than you would have probably done in a corporate job. You can go out of the way and do something different, and be one more thing is that wearing multiple hats, right? So you get to do everything. You don't just do, if you're a good engineer, you're not just doing development, you're talking to customers, you're working on the design of the application, you're even sometimes working HR related stuff, like you're doing pretty much everything. And you probably, a startup journey actually gives you that freedom. Both, I'm not just talking about as a founder, but also as an employee in a startup, right? So that is the kind of perk you get in working with early stage smaller companies.
Come on, you have been talking about all these abstract things. Tell me how much money you make in a startup. So don't give me an exact figure, but at least tell me that it is worth it from that point.
I mean, there are different ways of looking at it. To be honest, long-term journey is critical. Don't look for money in the first 3 years, and I'm still in my first 3 years, so I'm not looking for money yet. But if you are in the journey for long, look at inspirational journeys, right? I mean, right? Think about Jeff Bezos, or even in India, Zomato, Deepinder Goyal, right? So look at their journeys. I mean, it took like 10 years, 15 years, probably more. Now they are being known for like richest man in the world and all of.
Right. The growth is exponential, is what I understand.
When you're starting the company, usually the first investment is a pre-seed investment, and then you go to a seed investment, and then to the Series A. Typically, there could be some bridge rounds in between. So I would say that until your companies hit the Series A round, you're probably not one of those like in a place where you're in an upper income group, right?
तो अपना घर चलाने के लिए हो जाना चाहिए, right?
हाँ, घर चलाने के लिए तो हो जाना चाहिए. If you're not having that, then probably there is something wrong. But वो तो हो जाना चाहिए. But like if you where you look at some of those more popular startup founders we hear about a lot, right? But even like startups which are like 100 million, 500 million, so that's a very big, decent number in India particularly. So once you hit there, I think that is where you're looking at a very successful startup founder life, right?
So it's like a breaking point or a threshold. उसके ऊपर चला गया, then exponential growth है.
मेरा thought तो वही है that once you found your product market fit, एक breaking point होता है जहाँ पे you are pushing hard to sell your product versus every month you're selling. So when that happens, then you scale exponentially. So in a very typical, I mean, this is very hard to generalize this time period, but I would say most startups hit this point, successful startups hit this point anywhere between 2 years to 5 years, right? So this is the broad window where one should be able to see this point. But because uske baad to you're no longer, I mean, as a founder, what happens also is then you're no longer in the details of anymore, where you're just running the process. right? You're not into the details of it. So, but I'm not there yet. But I'm more in the details of it so far. But the idea is, yeah, I mean, we are getting there. So every month now we are growing at 100, 200%, which every 2, 3, 4 customers that are building up. So I'm looking forward to hitting that point hopefully next year, somewhere later half of next year.
Right, and we wish you all the success for that. It's a very important problem, to be honest, to be solved that you are doing, both commercially and environmentally, helping medium and large scale industries with their production efficiency, with their energy efficiency, and so on. So, thank you so much for joining.
Great. Thank you so much. Yeah.